Hi and welcome back to Wire with Nolin, RECC. I'm Communications Manager Sarah Fellows, and with me today I have a very special guest. Mr. Gary Kohtala is one of the Honor Flight veterans that we're going to be sending on the Touchstone Energy Honor Flight in September, and so we're really excited to talk to you today. This has been a long time coming, so yes. We had you and Mr. Pike, who has unfortunately died since. You know, we were able to honor him, but a couple of years ago, when we had selected you all for Honor Flight, of course that got canceled with COVID, and last year it did again, and so we're just really grateful that this is working out this year.
Well, I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much.
So, Mr. Kohtala, I just want you to tell your story. We want people to get to learn about you, and we're kind of gearing up to get you ready to go on Honor Flight. So, in doing that, we just want to learn about you. So, can you talk about yourself, where you're from, your family, those kind of things?
Okay, well, I grew up in my early years in northern Upper Michigan. I'm an Army brat. My father joined the Army, and subsequently we moved to various places, ultimately retiring. He retired in Washington State. I finished high school in Washington State, and I joined the Army subsequently. I'm 68 years old. I'm single. I have 4 daughters that haven't failed me or disappointed me yet. They are very amazing, and I moved out here to Kentucky upon retirement from the U.S. Army and Boeing back in 2016.
Okay. So what brought you to Kentucky then?
Well, several things. I was here in 2000 for a contractor job at Fort Knox. And what happened is I was a contractor working on the Bradley fighting vehicle and the Abrams tank trainers in Fort Lewis, Washington. And when I came out here, I discovered the wonderful people, the mindset, and just the area, the good cost of living. And I said, this is where I want to retire. Okay. And I knew that in the year 2000.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow. Well, we're grateful that you were able to come here. So you are career military. You've always done that?
Yes. I enlisted delayed entry program at age 17. And on my 18th birthday, I went active duty and spent tours in Vietnam, Thailand, Korea, and Germany, and a handful of tours in the United States.
Wow.
The Vietnam and the Thailand tours were given credit for combat.
So let's talk about that military career. So you joined, like you said, you joined right out of high school. So what kinds of things were you doing when you first started?
Well, I am a ham radio operator and have been so since 1967. In my early years, I enlisted in the United States Army for the ASA, or Army Security Agency option. I already had some training in radio techniques and Morse code and the like, so I became a Morse code interceptor with the Army Security Agency.
Okay, that sounds fascinating.
I was actually kind of like doing my hobby and getting paid for it too.
Wow, how long did you do that?
I did it for 22 years.
So is that what you were doing when you were in Vietnam?
I was, yeah. I was in an aviation company, and we flew combat missions, doing intercept and direction finding of enemy targets, and then calling in airstrikes as a result.
Wow.
Because the radio gave them away.
So you've heard a lot.
I have heard and seen a lot, absolutely, personally.
So your time in particular, and I know it can be hard to talk about, you know, military service, especially if you've seen any sort of combat. Can you talk about that time at all?
I can. It's actually therapeutic for me to talk about it. Many people don't realize that veterans often have something called PTSD,
right,
or post-traumatic stress syndrome, or it was a disorder, I think is the word. And there's a stigma attached to that, and it's really not right. It's not fair.
Right.
And many of us have basically been kind of relegated to, you know, to ourselves, and we have to cope with this on a daily basis. And anybody can be traumatized or have stress and actually have the same sort of symptoms as combat veterans do, and they don't even know it. So many veterans have been diagnosed decades after the fact when they had their experience. And I never thought that you know, this person would have PTSD, but when they got diagnosed and underwent training or therapy, I should say, they were diagnosed with PTSD.
Wow.
And it creates a lot of problems in one's life.
So you said kind of talking through some of that service you find helpful?
I do. There are lots of things that trigger me personally. It's just a matter of being hyper vigilant, always watching, you know, being very careful about who's around and looking for the exits and entrances and any loud noises and things like that. Those can all be triggers. Wow. And then there's things that you don't even know what triggers it. I mean, something on the television, a sound, a smell, a situation, and you just, you don't know from one day to the next. And there's really not much you can do about it. You can just cope with it, and there's really no cure per se.
Right. Well, thankfully there seem to be it's a little bit more recognition that that does exist now. So hopefully there's more resources for especially our veterans who a lot of them, like you said, are dealing with that.
Absolutely. There's still people out there that have been in different conflicts. They don't even know they have it.
Wow.
A lot of them turn to negative things, alcohol and various things, and it ends up causing more problems than it's really worth.
Wow.
But once you have a realization that you might have a problem and you seek the help, then things can be better. One day at a time, yeah.
So, so talking a little bit through that service then, especially, and I know, again, with that combat experience, I can't even imagine what you saw and did, and what are your memories of that time, particularly your time in combat? What really stands out to you?
Well, on the day of the ceasefire when the war was supposed to end, I happened to have worked the night before, and I was sort of off. You're really never off in a combat zone, but I was able to sleep. And 10 minutes before that ceasefire was supposed to start, the sirens started going off and all of these big loud booms all around. Apparently what had happened, the enemy had taken it upon themselves to throw everything they had at us and just kind of, you know, say, we're still here, you know, and just kind of a send-off.
Oh my goodness.
And that in itself was traumatic.
Oh, I can't imagine.
I mean, we were all dispatched to the perimeters, and we had all of our gear and weapons and all of the items we should have had, and we were waiting for something to happen.
Yeah.
It never happened.
Wow.
Yeah, so they were just basically giving us a send-off 10 minutes before. They probably didn't want to carry all the stuff back.
Right.
Yeah, they were probably just expending it just because.
Wow, wow. So after you were in Vietnam, you said, I mean, it sounds like you traveled quite a bit with what you were doing with the Army. What kinds of things were you doing in those other places once you were done with the combat piece of it?
I preferred overseas duty in my specialty because you actually had a live mission to do, something really hands-on. So I stayed overseas as much as I could. I had the Vietnam tour, I had the Thailand tour, and I had 4 tours in Korea and a tour in Germany. The days in between, the years in between, I was in several different Army posts in the United States, and we practiced basically painting rocks, washing trucks, going out in the field and playing Army, you know, the foot soldier, ground soldier roles. But we really didn't do anything that was satisfying. So I would either re-enlist or request to go back overseas because I had a real tangible mission at that time. And it was very satisfying. And I liked it so much because ham radio is a big thing in many countries. So when I was in Korea, I got a ham license. So I stayed in Korea for almost 10 years with those 4 tours. And when I wasn't doing my hobby at work, listening to different signals and so on and intercepting, I was operating ham radio and talking to everybody in the world. Because everybody wanted to talk to me. Yeah.
So talk about, I don't know if people maybe not be familiar with what ham radio is. Can you talk a little bit about that and what kind of role, because you were able to do that, what kind of things did you do with that then?
Well, ham radio, basically, it's a government, federally licensed radio service. It's a personal radio service that anybody with the right technical skills and knowledge can get into. If I can do it, anybody can do it. The premise is that we provide a pool of trained emergency communications people and somebody that can help in times of conflict just by virtue of having the electronics and the radio training.
Right.
And we practice by doing all kinds of different activities that comes down to getting ready for the big one. If something happens, many hams practice sending messages. We send personal messages for people like a radiogram. It's like a telegram, but it's over the radio. And we use that to practice and test our effectiveness from coast to coast.
Wow.
We respond during disaster, hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, and all of those sorts of things. And we provide contingency. When something goes down, something happens in the emergency realm, the telephones, cell phones, and internet, they're usually the first to go.
Right.
So ham radio operators and similar people provide a contingency. And I've further gone beyond just ham radio. Ham radio is more of a hobby for me, but I also provide some service to the U.S. government. It's for FEMA, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Defense, and if I remember the acronym correctly, cyberspace, what is it now? Cyber Infrastructure Security Agency. And I provide communications, backup communications on government frequencies, and I have a license for that, all because I have a ham license. So I got the ham license, it opened up other doors for me. Air Force Mars, something called SHARES, which is another contingency communication service. So
you are active in it, doing that now?
I don't know what my life would be like without radio.
Wow.
In some form or another.
Yeah.
I've been doing it since I was a teenager, and I do it every day, been continuously licensed.
That's so neat. I mean, I don't know that, again, I don't know how many people really know what ham radio is, and for, I mean, that's a really essential service that you're providing.
I think so.
Yeah.
Absolutely. For anybody that's interested in getting into ham radio, there's thousands of links on the internet. Just look it up on a Google search engine and you will find it. And you can find a niche, you can do whatever it is that you think might be, you know, satisfying to you. You can try this and try that till you find your little part and just fit right in and provide a service.
So when you were doing that while you were still in the Army, what kinds of things, like when you were in Korea, for example, what kinds of things would you intercept? Like, were you intercepting messages then, or what kind of roles were you playing when you were not like in a full-on combat zone?
Well, the job was very similar. In the combat zone, we were doing a series of electronic warfare sort of things, like direction finding, actually locating the transmitters.
Okay.
And then we would also make reports and things so that commanders in the field could act accordingly and stay safe and be able to anticipate any threat that might be out there. In various locations, in the combat theater, it was one thing. It was based on the Morse code and the electronic warfare scenario. When I was in Germany, I was in a fixed site. When I was in Korea, I was in a fixed site. And it was joint service. We had Koreans or Germans, depending on where I was, side by side with us, doing the same vital job, keeping the enemy honest, basically, if you would. Yeah. And then in the United States, when I was there, I did get to go on some exercises and participate in the real electronic warfare side of things, where we would actually go out in the field and people were trying to conduct their operations. Well, I operated a jammer. and I denied their communications to them, and I was very popular. They were out to find me.
Oh wow!
Yeah, that's just part of it. Jamming and direction finding.
Wow.
It all interacts, and it all fits into make one big picture.
Huh.
I can't really go into all the details, but the basic principles are pretty open source, and you can find a lot of different information on the internet about it.
I don't think people necessarily think about that kind of like logistical support that everybody needs to be able to do their job in the military. I mean, if you don't have that kind of logistical support to do that, I mean, it makes a huge difference. And I don't know that people kind of place that kind of a role as so important.
Well, if you deny someone their communications, there's a whole bunch of dominoes that fall.
Right.
I mean, certain things, your supplies, your ammunition, your food, anything, anything in the supply chain can be tampered with. We could send it to the wrong place, like we did when I was in Fort Lewis, Washington.
Oh wow!
And the mail and the chow went to the other side of the training center, and they didn't like us very much, but nevertheless, yeah, we jammed them, and then we got in and intercepted. We interjected ourselves into their nets, and we actually broke in, and we were able to send false messages and actually divert their equipment and their food and their mail.
Oh wow!
And it's ever so present now with the cyber threat on the internet. I mean, that's just another level. I mean, I was just doing basic things 72 to 94, but it's gone up exponentially now with the internet. We didn't have internet back then, except for the latter days. But electronic warfare and the cyber threat, they're always there.
Oh yeah, that's a huge part of
absolutely
of things today.
And I'm sure that things have changed. I've been retired since 1994, and I still do ham radio. I still stay on the cutting edge as much as I can. But what's happened in the military, I only get little glimpses of, and I'm sure that there's been a lot of improvements and changes and the like.
Wow.
So yeah.
So the total years of your military service, so you talk about just kind of when you entered and when you retired and what you've been doing since then.
Well, like I said, I got in on the delayed entry program on my 17th birthday.
Which was when?
It was in 1971.
Okay.
And then on February 15th, 1972, my 18th birthday, I went on active duty. I was in high school. That was like halfway through the year.
Wow.
I went to the principal and said, look, I have a commitment. I have enough credits. Will you please let me graduate with my class? He looked at my records. I had more than enough credit. I was a good student, and he waived the rest of the actual time I needed.
Oh wow!
So I was in Vietnam, and my actual diploma from my high school showed up in the P.O. box in Vietnam.
Wow.
At the end of that school year.
Wow.
And it was just amazing. I didn't get to go to my graduation or anything like that. I was in Vietnam.
You were busy.
Yeah, I was definitely busy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And you said you retired in what year?
I retired in 1994.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a long career to have been serving our country.
I would still be in right now. Back then I might not have had so much ambition, but now seeing the way the world situation is, I would love to go back if there'd be any way. But it's just not in the cards right now unless something drastic occurs. So
what has it meant to you to serve the country that way?
Well, I think you said the magic word is service. My father was in the Army. He spent a tour in Korea and also 2 tours in Vietnam. My sister, I'm the oldest. I'm the only son, and I have 2 sisters. The one sister was in the Army. She did the same job I did, but it was after Vietnam.
Really?
Yeah. And then the other sister, she was in the Army, and then she got out and she went back in the Air Force and then got out. They didn't retire or anything like that, but because they ended up with kids and life happened.
Right.
The way I look at it, life is about service and giving something back, because somebody always helped me, and I'm thankful for what I have, and there's always somebody less fortunate than me. So to try to safeguard the freedoms that we enjoy here in this country, I am just so pleased to have served.
Wow. Well, we thank you for your service.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
So the honor flight is a way of really thanking our veterans for their service. And we know, and we had this conversation before we started
Yes.
this interview, about especially the men and women that served in Vietnam really didn't have a good experience of coming home. It was not, they weren't welcomed in the way they should have been.
That's true.
And in many ways were injured. It was just the stories I've heard. It just is heartbreaking, knowing that that's what you and our other veterans went through. What does it mean to you to be able to do the honor flight, where you know that, I mean, from the time you all leave, and I know you don't know necessarily all the details, and it's kind of better that you don't, because it's a little bit fun to have a surprise,
well,
but from the time you leave until the time you get home, you will know how much you're appreciated. And how does it feel for you to kind of go from coming home from Vietnam, you know, knowing that people saw you in a way that wasn't fair, to now being able to kind of go on this trip that really is going to honor you and the service that you gave to our country? What does that feel like for you?
It's very humbling. I came back and, I did Vietnam, and then I went to a subsequent tour in Thailand from Vietnam. So those were 2 combat tours. And then when I finally got back to the United States, there really was no welcome. There was criticism, there was negativity, toxins. I was called a lot of bad names. They spit on me, they threw things at me, and just basically felt, you know, made me feel really low.
Yeah.
And to add all of that to what I'd already experienced, it really wasn't easy. Mm-hmm. And all these years, things have gotten better. The mindset has improved quite a bit in, you know, amongst the American people. But really, nobody's ever said formally any kind of thanks. Mm. So for me, going on this honor flight will be a measure of closure. And it will allow me to, just to come full circle. Let's just put it that way. I've thought about a lot of things. I agonize over a lot of things, and I always come to the conclusion there's really nothing I can do to change them. I can just live one day at a time and move ahead and do the best I can. And now finally somebody's actually recognizing what I have done and others like me have done, and I am very grateful for that. Wow. Very grateful. Yeah.
That's really neat.
Thank you.
So what are you most looking forward to for the honor, during the honor flight?
Well, of all things, I want to see the Vietnam Memorial. Okay, that's the main one. Yeah. And there's supposedly an Army Security Agency memorial down there somewhere.
Oh, really?
That was added subsequently in the last 5 or 6 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there was a big problem with getting it approved and getting funding and all of that. But between the 2 of them, that would provide me with some great satisfaction and some closure. And just being able to see where everything springs forth from. I mean, that's the capital of this great nation. Yeah. And I've been there before, but it's been like 35 or 40 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's been so long. So yeah. It's time to go back and actually take some time. I was always rushed because I was on active duty back then.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so now I'm retired and I can take my time and just do it right and actually take it all in this time.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, we're grateful to be a really small part of it, but
oh, you're a very large part of it, believe me. Yeah.
Well, we're so grateful for your service, and we're so grateful for you to come in and talk to me about this and to share your story. Is there anything else you want to share before we kind of wrap up our time?
No, unless you have any particular questions. Like I said, if you get me talking, it's going to be hard to make me stop. I have lots of stories and a lot of things I could discuss, but I know we're limited in time, so I will keep it on time if I can.
Well, we appreciate that. If you wanted to share a story, I would never stop you, though. So.
Well, I understand. I understand.
Well, thank you again for your service and for talking to us today, and we'll look forward to hearing back after the honor flight and hear how it goes. I'm
looking forward to it. Yes, it's been on my calendar for a while, and I'm really excited. I can't wait. It's going to be a great experience.
Glad it's finally happening.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And thank you all for joining us again for Wire to Wire with Nolin, RECC.